Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unleash Your Inner Athlete with me, your host, Julia Pizzi-Kamey. And today we're going to really be getting into a very important topic, and it's to do with mental health and how it affects performance. And we're going to get into really discuss psychotherapy, but really deep psychotherapy as well. And, understanding that it isn't just about when crisis hits, you can actually be a really powerful tool to help you go on and live the life that you want to live. Now, we all know high performers very often can come up with sudden challenges without even realizing it. It just seems to come out of the blue. You get the burnout, the stress, the emotional disconnect, and it can all happen very subtly. But what I wanted to help you today with my guest is to really give you some tools and some strategies that are really going to help you change that, know to recognize the symptoms and when you really need to go in a little bit deeper and go inwards a little bit more than just focusing on the external. So I'd like to welcome my guest, Maria Kempinska. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Julia. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Now, I've been looking at some of the stats when it comes to mental health, and I was absolutely shocked. I kind of was trying to compare the difference between UK and US, because US is such a big country compared to the UK, and I was quite staggered. I think it was something like 1 in 4 people in the UK are struggling with a mental health issue, as opposed to in the US, I think it's 1 in 5. Oh. And that really, I think since the pandemic, about 500,000 people have been claiming disability because of this. It's like the biggest cause of people taking time out from work. And I think it was almost 17 billion pounds has been spent on mental health. And in the NHS, it's you can be anywhere between 4 and 79 days before you can even get care. And in the States, I think it was even worse. It's something like, between getting symptoms and getting help can be like 11 years. And I think only 43% of people are actually getting care. And I think 6% of people have a serious mental health issue. So the numbers are absolutely staggering. And this isn't getting any better. So this is why people like you are really important, and sharing your story, sharing your knowledge is really important, because this is a crisis. And it's kind of, for me, it's kind of figuring out who really has the serious mental health concerns that is really affecting their life, and those who are just claiming mental health, but maybe there's other things they can do that can really help pull them out of this sort of downward spiral that they're getting themselves into. But before we get into that, I really want to understand, because you've had a really interesting career. So what actually got you into psychotherapy?
Basically, my parents were Polish political refugees. They were in the war. My parents were, my father from the German side, the Nazis came in. They murdered a couple in his family and terrorized and tortured his parents. One of my uncles was murdered in Auschwitz. On the other side, the east side, my mother's side was the Russian side, and her family were taken by the Russians. But both my mother and father were prisoners of war in Siberia. And my father was in one of the northernmost gulags inside Siberia, which was below freezing point, terrible. And as I grew up, I was 6 of us were in one bedroom in Paddington. And we then moved outside Watford to what they call a sink estate now, South Oxley. I didn't feel as if it was a sink estate, but I've got my street cred because I was brought up on a council estate. And all the people were lovely, actually, on my estate. But what I realized was everybody was working hard, but internally, when you go home, they still had the residue of the war. My father didn't see his family. My mother lost all her family. My father lost his brothers. They had to pick themselves up, do something again. My father was training to be a barrister in Poland. My mother was a mathematician, but all of that had gone. So my father ended up working in factories, and my mother ended up making Christmas crackers. But I was very conscious of their story. And my mother used to tell the story, my father less so. And I think that was typical. But as I grew up, it was being, people are very conscious now that you have got the secondary trauma that happens from parents to kids. I didn't feel that it was a trauma that I was picking up. I just knew how sad and how devastated they were to lose their family. And the war itself, the power of Hitler and what one man can do. And on the other hand, it was Stalin on his side. But what war how it can devastate people's lives. And by the time I was a teenager, every Lent, we used to put on shows to raise money for charities. So I used to put on a show when I was a teenager to raise money for charity. So I was the director and a performer and did everything that you could do in order to do that. And then later on, I started the social action group at school, college. And also I was a volunteer in what was called an asylum then, which was an asylum. So you had people that had all sorts of mental health problems, from the really severe that you could not, that would be in Broadmoor today. Some that were thrown into the mental health system because they couldn't be looked after at home. And some that were discarded because they were children of single mothers. And some because they were physically, they had a problem physically somewhere. So it was a massive building in Leavesden Asylum. And I volunteered there. I was one, and I'm still one of those people. If somebody says, can you do this? I say yes, most of all. And by going there, it taught me about the extreme in mental health. I actually wanted at that point to become a psychiatric nurse. And my father said, I'm not signing the forms for you. And I wanted to be in the theatre. And my dad said, you're not doing that either. So true to form and being a bit rebellious and being Polish rebellious, I ended up in the theatre and in mental health. But I was also a Samaritan when I was 19 or 18. I worked with Chad Vara. He'd just started the Samaritans at that point. And I used to take phone calls and things. And I think I was one of the youngest at that point. And so mental health and making people feel better was something that I just picked up, sort of being around my parents. And when we'd watch television, there was something funny on. It lifted everybody's spirits, and great musicals or great films used to pick people up. And the rest of it was working. So the working ethos I got from home, because we were always working. And, you know, sort of the whole point about TV and films and comedy would just lift everybody's spirit and you'd feel better. So all of those things I learned, and most people do learn a lot from when they're teenagers. You then go out into the world thinking, oh, yes, I'll do everything differently. And you find that you don't. And then this third part of your life is like making up for it. It's repairing things that you've done incorrectly and trying to resolve and, you know, sort of find a resolution to your life. And what the hell am I doing here if you haven't done that earlier? So I've learned, there's so much I have learned, but I started reading as a teenager, actually. I was fascinated by mental health. I read a lot of Russian sort of Dostoevsky, Tolstoy when I was a teenager. And
deep stuff.
Yeah, I know. And yet, you wouldn't think to look at me because I'm blonde. But
that's a terrible stereotype.
I know, but it's true. You know, most women with your colour hair are deemed to be much more intellectual than somebody with blonde hair. And they're stereotypes that are funny. I'm taking it in humour. You've got to be funny. And yeah. But I also started reading somebody called John Bowlby. And he talked about the attachment theory. And I read that when I was 16. And when I was a very small baby, I was in an isolation unit for 3 months. So I was tiny. So by the time I came out, I didn't know who my mother was. I didn't recognize her. She couldn't come to visit me because she was pregnant. So I realized that impacted on me because I was reading his books. It just opened my eyes and I thought, right, I've got to find out more. And then I just kept reading and read Jung, C.G. Jung, and happened to me through a boyfriend of mine who was an actor at that time, somebody who was training to be a psychoanalyst. And he introduced me to Jung. He said, you've got to read him. So I started reading him and then reading Winnicott and Klein and all the rest. I was at least favoured with Freud, to be honest. He didn't resonate with me. Although, you know, people used to talk about Freud a lot more. But I was always interested in that. But, you know, you've got to manage your life. There's only so many hours in the day. So eventually I started my business. And then when I had some money, I decided to do my MA in psychotherapy and healing, which I did. And then I met a professor from Essex University who said you should do a PhD, because I had a bit of a contretemps with him, we'll call it a discussion. He hated business, and I said that's why therapists should be in business. And he said, you should do a PhD. I said, right, I will. And he said, well, you've got to travel all the way to Colchester. I said, I don't care where I have to travel to, I'll do it. And that's what I did. So that took me 6 years because it's part-time. And I did have to travel up to Colchester. But I just thought, look, this has been made enough. Nothing is easy. Let's put it that way. No. If you want to do something, you've still got to struggle. You've got to get there. You've got time. You've got to pay for it and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if you want to do something, you've got to do it. And I thought, great, I've been given an opportunity. He was a very well-known psychotherapist, psychoanalyst. And I thought this couldn't be better. Was he the easiest man to deal with? No, but he got me through. And I had to do an awful lot of work myself, which of course you do. But he was very good at kicking open doors when I needed them to be kicked open, because I did it in the mind of a comedian. And none of the people at my university only 2 people had ever watched stand-up, and they'd watched it twice. So I was fortunate to get 2 people to actually read my Viva, but I got through. And I think, you know, on a wing and a prayer has been my life, basically.
But the thing is, this sort of brings us towards you. I mean, we'll go into it in a bit more detail later on, but, you know, how you've used comedy and how important that is in terms of getting you through these challenging times. And I know we want to touch on that a little bit later, because comedy and entertainment has been a big part of your life, as well as the psychotherapy.
Yeah, and we will touch on that later, because I actually do a course in stand-up comedy for mental health, actually so far with Brentford Football Wellness Centre, which has been, I've done my 3rd season there, let's say. Yeah. And I love doing it. I'd love to do it with footballers and the rest, because everybody needs to know how to use their own humour. But I love the combination of the two, although I'm a practicing psychotherapist.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of people, as you say, with problems. And some people just don't realise that they can turn to psychotherapists for help. And I think that's partially to do with how we are defined. There's a lot of people that are counsellors, which is sort of the first stage. They make people feel better, but they don't understand the machinations and the different construct that the mind goes through. So if you think that the mind is 10% conscious and 90% unconscious, and a lot of that contains not only stuff that you're doing today, but your background, and, as Jung put it, your collective unconscious, which links into the whole world, then there's a lot going on inside us, which I absolutely love. And everybody is unique. And that is the other aspect of the work that I totally adore, is getting to know each person.
Yeah, and I think that must be really important. You know, if you are dealing with someone who's come to you with a problem, then you go, I would have thought that starting point is really understanding the person that's in front of you. And do you find that people sort of struggle to understand the difference a little bit between the different techniques? I mean, you've got psychotherapy, psychology, psychiatry.
All the time. And, you know, even journalists, they never look at it. So let me just give you a very quick overview. Psychologists are the ones that you might do an ADHD understanding of. So they do a form, you fill in the form, they interpret it, and off you go. ADHD or autism. Psychologists are the sort of more formulaic types. Then you've got forensic psychologists that might do stuff with the police and so on. So it depends what field they're in. But they are also the educators. Then you've got behavioral psychology, which is if a woman drops her handkerchief, how many people will pick it up? How many of those are men? How many are women? In the very simplest sense. Or Pavlov's, bell, when the dogs salivate and so on. You know, the autonomic system that you are trained into. And a lot of people in sport and in life, we're all autonomic. We have to be, otherwise life would be too unbearable. So there's those elements. Then you've got the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is the one who is able to give you medication. The thing that I love about psychiatry, which actually at the beginning of my training, I was not a big fan of medication, but I see how helpful it is now for people. So if you have somebody that's going off kilter, they've had a trauma and that resurrects, they need to stabilize for whatever reason. and the medication can help you stabilize. And alongside therapy, it helps you reorganize your mind. But the medication can help you stabilize, especially if you're in an extreme situation. You have to get out of that situation, go to a psychiatrist. They'll give you medication for the moment. If you're totally extreme, which people have been, running down I've heard of people running down naked down the A3, they are extreme. They need to be sectioned. So they're sectioned, put into care, where they are being looked after and they are being moderated. What sort of medication do you need? And they will then say, right, your mind is now a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more tempered. And then you can go into therapy and talk to somebody to reorganize it. And you gradually wean yourself off the medication. So I've talked to people inside that time when they've been in the units. And I've had people say to me, look, I'm on the wrong medication. And once I've talked to them and say, well, why do you think so? And listen to them, if they sound that they fully understand, I'll say, go to your psychiatrist and tell them. Go to your doctor and tell them what you're thinking. Because often people are too afraid. Oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. So you can give them the strength. They'll go and the doctor will change it and they feel better. But that still means that they're on medication. And if they're on therapy as well, which a lot of psychiatrists now recommend, then the two can work hand in glove. And when somebody stabilizes, they can come off the medication. Then they might go back on the medication if they fall out of kilter with their lives. So I've had this with clients that they might have been doing a course. Everything is fine. They don't need the medication or it's a lower dosage. Suddenly something happens with the course. They don't pass everything. They're out of kilter. The world has gone crazy. They feel a failure. Everything's gone wrong. They need to go back on a higher dose of medication, go back into therapy, stabilize, get your life back in order, and then you can wean yourself off. The only criticism I do have of psychiatry is that the accepted rate of recreational drugs that people take. A lot of psychiatrists, and I think this is common, and I can understand why, will give people their medication on top of recreational drugs.
Right.
So your mind is then being bombarded by not only the highs, lows, and ins and outs of recreational drugs, but also you've got a stabilizer. So if you are that person and you're going to see a psychiatrist, be open. Tell them what you're doing. Be conscious that you are putting something into your body, whether it's alcohol or drugs or cocaine or whatever you're taking. And a lot of people are taking ketamine. Let them know what is going on so that they can administer to you, give you the right medication. The downside of this is, and this I'm in two minds as well, but is that you have to administer it yourself. And a lot of people will be administering their own medication. And then suddenly they go, I'm feeling great. I don't need it. And they'll come off. And they'll come off because they don't need it on Wednesday. Thursday, they're fine. Friday. By the following Wednesday, they're feeling a little bit out of kilter. And suddenly they're back to where they started because they haven't been weaned off. Yeah. Respect the process. Respecting processes is part of what my key thinking pattern is for people. Doesn't matter what you do. So, if you're coming off alcohol, respect your community that's helping you. Don't think that, today you're feeling great and you can go to the pub tomorrow and it's all going to be all right. No, you're going to fall back into it. Respect that people are around you and they can help you. But if they say stay on the medication, then stay on it. If you find that your temperament is such that you find it difficult to stay on, get somebody to monitor you. Yeah. And allow yourself to hear that person as well. Because a lot of people won't allow somebody else to tell them. They think, oh, they're nagging me. They're telling me what to do. Yes, they are, because you need to be nagged. You need to be told. Now,
and I guess for someone who's quite like, I don't like to use the word domineering, but they're quite an assertive personality. I guess maybe for them as well, it's a little bit harder, would you say, to let go and let someone else take charge of this particular
Yeah,
in
just
this
be
particular
mindful.
context.
Yeah, because you can go totally out of kilter. And it could be with anything. There was a recent case of a woman who apparently didn't take her medication one morning, and her foot slipped off her pedal, and she drove into the school sort of area and killed a couple of kids. Now, apparently she was on medication, and the story is that she forgot to take it that morning. Or she may be, the depth of it will come out in court. But, she can't live with that. She didn't do it on purpose, but their parents have lost 2 children and the children have gone. Because
it's kind of also compounding what the sort of mental health issues that she's already having as well.
Whatever was going on, and this is the problem, you cannot leave people to take their own medication, because the internal mechanism is one to get yourself better. I think often, I say this to people who are afraid of something. There's a wonderful book called The Gift of Fear. Everybody should read it. And it's, why do we become afraid? Well, sometimes it's instinct telling us there's something to be afraid of. You can't see it, but you need to be afraid. It might be somebody that is around you and you're picking up what they called the vibes in the 60s. What's going on in the ether, what's happening around you. And we do pick things up that are non-verbal. So as babies, we are pre-verbal. We pick everything up right up until about the age of 8. We pick things up that people haven't told us, but we know what's going on. Gradually, we lose that if we're allowed to lose it. Parents should tell their kids, what's your instinct? What are you picking up? Why are you feeling like that? What's happening? And then you can put their minds at rest. But we still have that ability. So also with ourselves, be respectful of yourself, of what's going on within you. And sometimes we take on too much. And sometimes we want to please. And this is my whole point of therapy, is know thyself. Know who you are, know your patterns. Where did you pick them up from? What's the expectation from home? What did your mum expect of you? What did your dad expect of you? So there are people, for example, who like their parents might have wanted them to be scientists, and they want to be actors. Well, they haven't done anything wrong. They might be great actors or performers, but they don't fit in with the parents because you didn't fit into the parents' model of being a scientist. So to them, you're not successful, although you might be incredibly successful. And so this weight of guilt and self, that you don't fit in, that you're just not worthy, still will linger until you're much, much older. And that's because the parents wanted you to be the Einstein or something. And this is the problem. Parents have got to recognize that their children are different, but you can recognize that you just don't fit into your family. You're the daffodil, let's say, or you're the orchid and your parents are daffodils. It's simple as that.
Because I guess that comes back to really, as you say, your story, your history, and how much that plays a part, particularly as you're getting older, and perhaps why things suddenly out of the blue can start affecting you. You can find yourself going in this downward spiral because something you're doing currently has just triggered a memory or something that happened in your past. It sort of triggered it on a below conscious level. That can bring this up. And this is probably why when we get into what you do, this deep psychotherapy is really important for, like I say, bringing that out and doing that inner work to help you understand, as you were saying, who you are, where you've come from, and the reasons that this is now becoming a problem for you.
And what could happen, people don't realize that your trauma, say you've gone through something, a split in a relationship, and relationships are very tenuous at the moment. Society impacts on us. This isn't just from within. It's just not your family. It's also our society and what they permit and expect, and how people treat you and how you respond to that is crucial. So that's why we're complicated. Your kaleidoscope of your mental health is fractured, if you like, for all of us, let's be clear. But it can be glorious once you understand, but you've got to get through it. So, something can happen to you, say you have a breakup, that will trigger potentially a breakup in your family. If your parents had a breakup, that might bring that back. Or if you've had a bereavement, that could bring up something in your own family. So, if somebody's lost somebody in their family, if somebody's taken their own life in the family and they hear a friend, their son has taken a life, it brings it all back. All these things can bring something back, as you say, from the unconscious. It just brings it forward. Why couldn't I do something? Why can't I help them? There's a lot of people that do want to help but don't know how. And I think that's the biggest problem.
And for you, when people come to you, what would you say are the sort of the biggest challenges that they're facing, the problems that they're facing? And what do you find is usually at the root? I mean, we can generalize. I mean, each person's very different and, they're all very unique in their own circumstance. But if we take kind of for now a general approach, what are people generally the biggest issues that come to you? And then what's that underlying thing?
Yeah, so because I'm it's interesting because I'm a deep therapist. I deal with couples, individuals as well. So normally it's a relationship breakup, or somebody will recommend somebody to come in. Or it could be that they're lost. Or it could be, they could talk about suicide ideation as being the trigger for the actual act. And it's not. I've done work with an amazing doctor over in America who is setting up different tenets for that, who's setting up different principles for that, how to look out for people that need that help and support. And some people have that. It just depends on the person. But overall, very often it's loneliness, or I've been down this road before, or relationship breakup. A lot of men come in because somebody has recommended for them to come in. Women tend to do it more willingly. And the reason I think women do it more willingly, and we've talked about this, you and I, and women talk about it. It's not that women tend to talk more to each other. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's because every month, our body changes. We are constantly changing. We are not stable inside ourselves. And I don't mean that we are more likely to be unstable. It's just that our physicality, our physiology changes all the time. And because of that, because we can't find that stability inside ourselves because of the natural changes that go on, it affects our minds as well. And we are much more sensitive to other people's feelings. Yeah. So in that respect, women know something's going wrong. They don't know how to deal with it. But I've had couples who want to adopt a child and want to make sure that they're ready or deal with all the issues that might come with that. But very often it's a breakup. So I have couples when they come in as a breakup. The husband might come because the wife might say, if you don't go, I'm not going to go back to you. You need to look at what's going on here. Actually, I do that slightly differently to most people because I've trained as a mediator. So I'll see the couple together a few times, perhaps once, perhaps twice, but then I'll see them separately and mediate between them. And I don't mean mediate about the financial stuff. I'm talking about mediating on what they need to express so that the other person knows without the intensity of the fire that goes on between couples by that time. But young people, I love young people coming in, and it can also be, I haven't got a relationship. I've just moved in with somebody and I've walked away, but I don't really know why I did that. I need help, that type of thing. Or somebody who's drinking too much, something is triggering them. And I think the good thing that's happening about mental health is that people are aware that somewhere a part of their life is activating a part of their mind that is less than, sort of stable, let's say. Some people come because they have to, because they want to train to be therapists or counselors, and they have to go through the process.
I mean, you say you have met a lot of couples come to you. I mean, do you find that usually the causes of this come about because, going back into their history a little bit, there's some unresolved problem, like you said, their history of seeing their parents together, or maybe that one person's need to dominate and be in complete control, and another person may be unable to express what they need. Are these common things? And how is that affecting then other areas in their life?
it's so interesting because of the way the world is changing, you know, and very often people don't realize that they should marry somebody that is the same type of as them. So Myers-Briggs, I do MBTI, which is more psychological types under Jung. It's so useful because I've had couples. So, for example, if you're in a sort of a corporate system, your life will be sort of pre-organized, you know, the ladder on which you're climbing, and you're more likely to get on with somebody in the corporate system. If you're in a more entrepreneurial system, whether you're a journalist or run a business, the person in the corporate system doesn't understand that mindset, doesn't understand that things are not prescribed, because the corporate system is prescribed. Everything, you know where you're going. Then you start working, you're a manager, then you go in the director, then you go on the board, and so on. You know the ladder to climb. And by the time a business goes into the corporate world, it has a system that's in place. Entrepreneurs don't have a system, but the corporate mind will be thinking, well, why aren't we doing it this way? And the entrepreneur will be saying, I need to do it this way because I need to be reactive, responsive. The two might clash. And also, it's if somebody's more thinking type and somebody's more of a feeling type. Now, majority of women are feeling types, according to Myers-Briggs. And that means that you think about how people feel first. Majority of men are thinking types. That is the structure. How does this work? How can I make it work? What's going to be the right process, the system? And a few women, a lesser number of women, are thinking types. So women who are thinking types don't mix with other women, essentially. And they've got to find thinking types that make sense. Otherwise, you're constantly dealing with, it doesn't mean that you don't think or feel. It means what comes first. So in a business, for example, feeling types, or at home, a woman might be saying, I want everybody to feel good. And the thinking type person might say, yeah, but we can't afford that. Or we can't fit 100 people into the house. I want the whole street to come. I don't want anybody to feel left out. The feeling type says, I want everybody to be included because it's so horrible to be left out. And the thinking type is like, we can't fit 100 people in. It doesn't make sense.
Practical.
Practical. Exactly. And the two have to try to find a way to communicate. Now, the feeling type might say, but this is what I want. And that will come back from, again, that will engage with their own means of communication, how they were brought up, were they allowed to say something, how they were trained, and I mean trained by watching their parents speak. How were they trained to communicate? So as children grow up, if your parents speak and discuss things, you're more inclined to speak and discuss things. If your parents were arguing all the time, you might get into arguments and think, that's normal. I don't mind an argument. And of course, sometimes arguments aren't too bad. I don't think you should be necessarily in everything has to be peaceful. Some people live with arguments and that works for them. And it just depends whether who's the strongest. So I think this is why business is so useful. I'm not talking about corporate business, but the rules, make rules for yourselves. This works for us, that doesn't work. You know,
and I guess you could do that in any setting, couldn't you? It doesn't just have to be in your relationship. It could be in your business, your work, any kind of setting. It's getting those boundaries and rules, because I think that is a problem. I was reading something earlier today, and it sort of light bulb went off about, you know, in my past, it was like I was always one who wanted to do everything and make everyone's life easier, and I was kind of very passive in a lot of things instead of creating those boundaries where I thought I was helping people. I was actually being taken advantage of, and then that leads you down a spiral, if you like, of self-doubt, you know, resentment and all these other things. So is that play a part at all?
I think, and more people, you see, the system of hierarchy is, they call it patriarchal, is a thinking type. I steer away from patriarchal and matriarchal.
Yeah.
Patriarchal is much more all-inclusive thinking, but the combination of the two can happen. So when I was in business, you're quite right. I had people that would say to me, oh, Maria, I need to do this at home for my baby. Doesn't matter how much time they've had off. Because I'm a woman, they expected me to give them more time off and take the load on myself because I was a mother, you know, and the rules they wouldn't ever say that to a man. And this came from men and women. And this is the whole problem. So knowing yourself, and especially in business, to know who you are. But a lot of women step into the business framework, don't even think what they want to change in the framework themselves, what they can introduce that works, and create a system for it. Now, I was lucky when I started my business because it was my business and I could help engage with the system and do the right system. That comedians would turn up, because obviously the comedy clubs, comedians could turn up to the comedy clubs on time. I knew they needed hand-holding. I knew that they needed reminding, and so on, the type of psychology that they had. Not that they were in any way lacking. They're all bright, all very switched on, but they needed reminding because they were on their own. So if you're aware of that, and I think women should work towards that. Instead, what most people do is, oh, that's what's written. That's what the business schools say. So I've got to follow that. No, you don't have to follow it. If you're setting up your own business, you can make your own rules. You can adapt the legal contract. This is your business. Have enough faith in yourself to do it that way. Go to a lawyer and say, what is prescribed? What has to be in the contract? This is what I want to add to it. And take your own power in with you to do it. You've got to live up to it, by the way. You've still got to know that.
I mean, is this sometimes why, and do you find it is more with women than with men? Because I always feel that men seem to have more of the mental health issues, but is it because this can then lead them down because they're not putting those boundaries in place, like you say, making sure the contract, whatever it may be, that can lead them then to get too much stress leads them to then burnout and then have this sort of decide they just not connected with whatever it is they want to do, whether it's their career, their business, people, relationships.
Yeah, because the men I've seen in very top, spheres of their lives, they are governed by the system. They engage with the system. It works for them. I don't mean it disparagingly. No, it works. And they are there very often. They are there to provide for their family. And the wife, maybe they have an agreement with a partner or wife. You will look after the kids. You can work and I'll bring in the money and I'll look after you. But the stress on men can be incredible as well, but they don't necessarily always engage with what's happening with children because the wife or the mother does that brilliantly. And very often you can hear men say, oh, my wife looks after our social calendar. And that's great. They've come to an agreement, what works for you and what doesn't. However, I've also worked with couples or no couples that are both in the corporate world and they'll share certain things. But this is the type of thing you should do either in your own mind or with somebody before you get married. How are you going to cope with this? If you want to have children, how are you going to cope with looking after the children? And men find it difficult to cope with children who are pre-verbal because they don't understand that interaction. It's not autonomic. It's not in their DNA. And because the DNA carries from the mother to the children, and girls, all that is activated in women. And if boys have never had that from the father, they won't understand. It doesn't mean the father didn't want to. It just means the father wasn't there or the father was doing something else. And there's nothing wrong with that if you come to an agreement. And sometimes there is this expectation of men, you have to do this because I need it to share. Well, why? Why? If it's not in his ability, later on, he might do something that you don't do. So if you've got a son and the man can't get up in the middle of the night because he's working the next day and you can sleep during the day because you've got time off, you'll know that your husband will go off with your son to do boys' things, football, right? Something like that to give you time off. So what you lose at the moment in sleep, you can gain later on. So it's that recognition of it doesn't have to be a fight. You can negotiate. It can be a discussion, negotiation, as opposed to, right, I'm leaving you because of this. You know, we need to be much more in that sort of negotiation, understanding of that. And that should happen before marriage. I think you know, my daughter's going to have a baby soon, which is going to be amazing. And I hear younger people talking, and they negotiate a lot more, understanding. Men understand babies, their wives' work, they negotiate with them. And I love to hear that between men and women. They take an interest, they talk about a lot of things, but they discuss them as well.
Yeah. So I was going to think, if we go into a little bit more about sort of I guess the psychological struggles that people start to have once they get to that stage, and they're not, you know, dealing with it in the way you've suggested.
You know,
how is that then affecting their performance?
Everything. So as you were talking about burnout, you know, when people have burnout, that is it. It's too late. They've got to take time out. They need to go and talk to a psychiatrist, which I do know most corporates help in this way. Most corporates will push you as far as they can. Let's be clear about this. Yeah. They have, you know, they do have their care section, which is HR. They do outsource everything, of course, because it's very tenuous for them. But if they outsource something, then you've got to go and see a psychiatrist. They might say you need some time out to find yourself again. You've overdone it, because then you are like the cart horse. You're doing for the family. You're also doing for business. You don't want to lose your job, so you do more. And your boss might need more to be done. He might be a great boss, but he too has what he needs to achieve. You know, so if you're a sports person, you need to be on the field. You need to get those goals, or you need to stop the goals, or you need to sprint and you need to be the fastest. So this pressure is on you, not only from work, and sport is work, and also from your family, because they have expectations. And yet I think the good thing is about working, if you can understand what your partner has to go through, that will help you take the reins off them and get other support elsewhere, because our culture is so fragmented. There's no support outside. And if you don't have community support, which most people don't, you're left to take on everything on your own. So burnout is, I'm doing too much, but it's impacting me from every direction. You know, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your partner, you're not giving me enough attention. Hang on. Yeah. You know, sometimes you don't need to fill your mind with something else. Do something else.
Because this is going to spiral down. It is going to eventually affect your health as well.
Everything.
Because all stress
if you burn out, that could be it for you. You might never go back to work. I know people that have burnt out and not gone back to work ever. It's how do you recognize that?
Well, that's it, because it's like, it's getting those people to take that step, because people don't always want to admit it. And it's kind of like, what is stopping people from taking that step? Is it just because, you know, how they identify as themselves as being this powerful or productive, fantastic, you know, super successful person? Or is it something deeper than that? Because most people, you think, well, I'm having a problem, I'm going to go and see the doctor, I'm going to go and see someone like yourself or whatever it is and deal with it. But for some people just keep going, keep pushing through. Is it a pain threshold thing? Because I know high performers, particularly athletes, they have a very high pain threshold, so they can keep going for a little bit longer. What would you say would be the main reason that, you know 500,000 people since COVID?
I know.
You know,
and it is the individual. But having said that, you know, when they're going and they're okay unless something triggers it. You know, so during COVID was one of the worst times. If you are high powered and you can do and do and do and you're successful, if your family breaks at that point, you've broken, because you've had enough. You need a structure around you that can pick you up. And I think in business, the boss is passing everything down. He looks as if he's able, John looks as if he's able to do everything over and over again, or Peter. You know, I'll give it to him because he's great at it. And you as a boss have to keep your eyes open on Peter. What signs is he showing? Talk to them. And all your friends, your buddies, you should have a buddy that can talk on your behalf. And we don't do that in business. We don't do it in sport, where somebody could say to the coach or the manager, look, that person is just going through a breakup. Just be aware of that, because this might have this knock-on effect. And our buddy in confidence should be that sort of therapist for them, with the therapeutic confidentiality. I'm doing this, and you've given me permission. If it becomes part of our normal working life, it's fine. We can do that. You'll have a buddy that looks out for you. And they do. This is why the AA is so successful. Your buddy looks out for you and comes in and says, you need help.
It's kind of like having a mentor. It's almost like whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in a corporate environment, or, just an individual at home having relationship issues, having someone like a mentor then.
Yeah, but a mentor isn't with you all the time, but a buddy is. So if you're at work, you should have a work buddy with you. And that is complicated, or just somebody that does your job somewhere else. I've always recommended that to women. Know somebody that does your job in exactly the same type of thing in a different company, so that you can compare notes. Yeah. And you can say to that person, it won't impact on your work because you're in a different company, but they can say to you, no, you're doing too much, or calm down. But you need somebody who understands everything you're up against. But that you and the people that I've spoken to that have had these, that have been overwhelmed at work in a place that is very, very supportive. They've given them time out. They've given them mental health support, physical health support. And then they say, when you're ready, come back. So when I had it with comedians, for example, if you saw that a comedian was getting out of control, drinking too much, something was going wrong, it would always show in there on stage. Call them and say, look, what's going on? How are you coping? And they'd say, look, yeah, I know. For them, it's a bit easier to know because they can see that they're not engaging with the audience. So they'd say, look, do you need some time out? Yes. Call me when you're ready. And I would always leave the door open. It's that the corporate has to do that. That's the benevolent, that's the feminine side of benevolence, of care. Keep the door open for somebody and allow them to feel, right, I've done enough and I need time out. So, okay, you need time out. Come back when you're ready.
Yeah. But how does someone go about finding a buddy? Because there's always an element of trust, does this person really understand what I'm going through? And how can I trust them not to tell everybody all my business? Because obviously it's a deeply personal and private problem, perhaps. And even the boss, they can have their help, mental health challenges as well.
I think this is where men are easier than women are. Men will tell each other. They'll go to the pub after work. You'll hear it in their humor. You'll hear it in a story. You'll know through somebody else. So men will find it easier. A lot of women who are working find it more difficult because they can't find somebody that's in a similar type of job, or where do I meet them? Most women do not go to the pub after work. They just don't. They go home. And that's the problem with a lot of women. And this comes back to couples when they get it wrong. The woman might not realize what the man's going through in setting up his business, doing business, being at work. He needs time out. The wife might want to bombard the husband with stuff. Why aren't you listening to me? Why don't you know what's going on with somebody? I'm carrying all of this. And the husband might be, but I'm thinking about work. And it's just respecting each other's needs, if you like. And sometimes the mother is more intuitive and will be saying, I'm picking up on this. And the husband has to respect that and say, well, what is it you're picking up? And a lot of top men in business say, I listen to my wife because she's much more intuitive than I am. She will tell me if something's wrong with somebody, or they are not to be trusted, or something like that, or there's something going wrong here. I don't know what it is. But if you respect that, you can work with it as well. And it's that dialogue and understanding each other.
Yeah. And then that, I assume, with that open dialogue, it really prevents, it's almost putting like a break on you having spiraling down into that burnout and feeling like you're just disconnecting. And then, which obviously can affect you emotionally.
It will affect you emotionally. There's no question it will. And as a therapist, I do everything for people to stay together as a couple until they decide to break up. So the institution of the corporate world, if you like, can impact on somebody to behave in a way they might not want to, and then they've got to deal with that and come home. So if you've got corporate worlds where everybody's sleeping with each other and you're not, that's difficult for you to deal with as an individual. You're going to be coerced to behave the way everybody does. Or if everybody goes to the pub and you don't, then you feel, I've heard that from people say, I don't want to go to the pub. I want to go to the gym. That's I want to go and do something else. But you feel you're not part of the team if you don't join in. And that is the corporate social pressure or the workplace pressure that you get, that people are under. And how do they do that?
Yeah. So I guess from a corporate perspective, they can always have things in place to, about respecting that not everybody wants to do the drinking sessions. Everyone has their own interests, and just because we work together doesn't mean we have to spend each waking spare moment, because that can then send someone into, I'm under pressure at work, I don't fit in, people don't like me, and you'll find you're not doing the job properly. That can make you feel insecure a little bit, worried about your job. And then you start taking the time off from work and it becomes harder to come back. I mean, I'm thinking.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's what does happen.
And then you start going down and down. And if you already have something that's been part of your history, part of your story, part of your values and belief systems, can then start to feed into that lack mentality, almost like I'm not good enough, people don't like me. And then you find I know this is an extreme, but you don't want to go out anymore. You don't want to see anyone. And then spending too much time on your own, it kind of really impacts everything 10 times worse.
Definitely. Or if you're working in an environment and you enjoy drinking and you're working in that sort of environment and you enjoy drinking and you continue to drink, you've got to somehow discipline yourself not to drink. But you're absolutely right. And most people are not geared up for the corporate environment. The corporate environment is so new. Really, it's only been around for the past 20, 25 years to the extent it is today. People didn't go to corporates the way they do. And the intensity of those relationships, as you say, are the ones that will feed into your, oh gosh, I can't communicate. I've lost my motivation. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not good enough. They don't like me. And of course, if that's what you come in with, you might be in the wrong job, by the way. And then you've got to find out, well, what is my right job? What am I good for? And that's the work I do as well. So I have clients that say, look, I'm doing something. I don't know why I'm doing it, but it seemed to be, and then we go through it and you can find out what works for you, what your mindset is, where you should be. And the training, the joy of today's world is you can retrain. But it means that you have to overcome, you've got to work and retrain. So you've got to do 2 jobs. But in my life, I've always done 2-3 jobs. So that was nothing new to me. It was upbringing to work and work and work. But if you're not part of that upbringing, you've got to change your mindset. And a lot of social media impacts on that as well. Oh, look.
Sure. Yeah.
You can make, you can be a millionaire by the end of the year. Why are you doing this terrible 9 to 5? So social media can hypnotize people into thinking in a terrible way about themselves. I'm not good enough because I should be earning more. And I've known people that want to be entrepreneurs, but don't have the capacity to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
No, but they just don't have the ability to be an entrepreneur. They have I have the sort of need, the joy of it. I want to be that person, But when it comes down to that, they can't organize themselves. They can't make money. They can't see something through. So to work in a system would be far better for them. And then you go into, well, why do you feel like that? Because, as you say, it could be in their upbringing that they stood out. They were the golden child. Entrepreneurialism means that you're in charge of your own business. So automatically you do stand out a little bit within the framework of your work, because people turn to you because you employ them. But you may not have the skills to fulfill that.
I mean, so if someone is struggling, what would you say are the sort of common symptoms that people start to notice, or they can check in on themselves, or someone maybe they work with, or someone who's close to them in their family, and say, I need to help this person, or I need to be there for this person, or maybe have a discussion.
No.
How do you start to notice things are starting to go in the wrong direction for someone?
The easiest thing is, are they sleeping? They're sleeping, they're eating, they're socializing. Are they communicating the way they did? So, when you invite them around, do they talk as much? Is there something hidden? Are they quiet? There's a fallacy about people or this story that goes around of people who do take their own lives. Oh, he was great. He was in a great mood. And then he took his own life. Yeah, because they made a decision. They've made a plan. They don't want to be here anymore. They found it too much. So they make a plan, he or she, and they go, right, that's it. Tomorrow I'm going to do that. And that's what I'll do. So they get confident. But if they're lacking confidence, you'll soon find out about their work. You can pick something up and allow people to say, look, I'm picking something up. He's not calling me as much. Or just allow them to talk to you. If they don't want to talk to you face to face, call them up. Don't do this nonsense that is given out, that if you are desperate, you will reach out. No, they do not reach out. You have to reach in. So if that person is going through something, keep calling, keep on the phone to them, keep trying, keep connecting. So, if a parent for some reason has broken up with their child, something has gone wrong and they aren't calling you, keep the door open for them. I'm thinking of you. I love you. I know you're busy. Call me when you can. Come from you. Don't go, oh, well, he hasn't called me. I've reached out 3 times and he hasn't called me. So I'm not going to do it. Don't do the tit for tat.
Yeah.
Keep the door open. Be that person. You sense there's something wrong. Keep in touch. And don't expect people who are feeling the really bad to keep in touch with you. They often close the door. They don't keep in touch. So just a call out to them might be the answer, or an email. I thought you might like to see this, or I'm going to such and such. Do you fancy coming? Because that might snap them out of it. But people do become introverted. They do go into their shell for a period of time. And they come out, they might start drinking too much, taking too many drugs. It might just happen like that. So it depends what your social group is like.
Yeah.
Spending too much, and that, they don't have the money. Doing something that is out of character can really, but in sport, I think it's incredibly difficult for people because they are bombarded by the needs of the spectators, or if you're in stand-up, the needs of the audience. Am I going to be good enough tonight? I'm raw. Anybody who is on their own, I always admire sports people who are sort of on their own and they have to compete or they have to perform because they are up against the force of nature, if you like. Are the audience going to be a good audience? Some of the comedians used to say, are they a good audience?
Do you find that's very common in your work, in sort of particularly in high profile environments like comedy, like in the entertainment industry and sport? Is there an awful lot of, imposter syndrome? Is there an awful lot of, that, they don't really see they don't have you think they would have a lot of self-belief and confidence, but is it actually underlying it? Is that really something that's not really there 100%?
Yeah, but I think anybody who has to do something like that, you never know what the audience is going to be like. You never know what the other team is going to be like. Who's going to pull what out of the bag? Are you going to be able to shoot that goal? Are you going to be able to get the ball over that fence? Are you, as a tennis player, going to be able to do the return that you need to do? Are you, is the flow state going to happen? Am I going to be fully in tune with myself and the audience tonight? Can I remember all my lines and so on? Can I do this? Or is there somebody, if you're a solo performer, if something goes wrong, you've got to pick it up. You've got to deal with it. So you've got to have those what if scenarios that go wrong. Whether you're in business or not, what if is crucial. So for me, it was like, what if a comedian doesn't make it? You know, I've got people traveling up to Scotland and in Portsmouth and in Bristol, the other side of London, 16 clubs all over the place, and comedians are all traveling there. What if they don't turn up? What am I going to do? And I'd have to put what ifs into place. Same with a comedian. What if I forget my lines here? How do I cope with that? And it's all in that preparation. And it's that side of you that is, don't expect everything to go right, because it won't. You know, and a lot of people, there is a lot on their plate. You know, they get more adulation if they do it right. Everybody, the women that used to flock around the male comedians was unbelievable. As soon as comedy became big, it took a while, but they would have all women flocking around them, you know, and women love men who are funny, by the way. And, you know, humor is a big thing. So just as a caveat. And I think that people don't look at the what if scenarios. How do I deal with this? And you're not going to win every time, but know that you're doing it for another reason. It's not just for the adulation. And this comes back to your own childhood. What are you doing this for? Why are you doing that? You just so happen to be brilliant at a particular sport, but somebody will have recognized that. What have they said about you? Who am I? What have people said about you that you're good at? Listen to that, write it down, go with that, because sometimes you can't see yourself. Allow yourself to be that person. If you're painting, show people your artwork. Let people tell you how brilliant you are, because if you haven't had that when you're growing up, you need it now. It doesn't matter what age you are. You know, explore the creative side of yourself, so that you get the creative often tells you who you are. But when you're performing, it's, can I bring all my skills together? Can I bring my mindset together at this moment to make it all work? So that becomes autonomic. I've now remembered everything. I know enough. I'm going to pull it out of my head. So a football player can't go, oh God, I've just forgotten my line. I'm going to go and read it. Which a comedian, if they're good, the audience is with them and can do that. You've got to do it, you know, and some of the spectators can be really, you know, unpleasant.
Yeah, very unpleasant.
Yeah, and, you know, that's quite cruel, actually. But they're projecting their lives onto this person or onto their team. And we know my family are football fanatics. So I know what happens when their team doesn't win. Oh my God, this is terrible. But equally, I feel elated when I watch, you know, sort of like Gout, who is the sprinter, the new heroic sprinter, who's 16, 18 now, I think, who's a fast sprinter. He's amazing. And I get an uplift when he wins because it has that resonance with you. How amazing. You know, I would have loved to have been more into sports. We couldn't afford it, so we couldn't get to school. But I loved all that element. But you find another way to do things. But when you watch sport, it does uplift you. It makes you feel better. So the spectators need to understand the impact they have on that person as well. And I think the spectators need to respect what it takes to be a brilliant sports person, a Formula One driver, you know, anybody. Who are they? What are they? How do they do what they do? How do they stay focused? Is quite phenomenal. And don't pour all your hope onto them. Find something within yourself that you love doing. Make sure that it's really hard, because then you'll appreciate what the sports person has to do. You know, give a part of yourself up into something.
Yeah, I think that's true. Anyone, you know, it's having that purpose in your life, having something that really means something, and you have to do the inner work to find out who you are, and then what is it that gives you purpose? What's the reason that keeps you getting up?
Yeah,
and it's okay to change. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the same for the rest of your life. You can change halfway through your life, 2/3 of the way through your life. It doesn't have to be a major thing, but it's taking those steps. And I think doing some deep work with someone like yourself, even if you're not at a crisis point, once you start to notice that something isn't right, to speak to somebody like yourself can really help, you know, take their life in a completely more positive direction than otherwise would have happened.
It can be for any reason. So I've had fathers who've lost their son and blame themselves. This is my fault. I should have been there. You know, even if they're older and their son's 50, why didn't I do something? Why didn't I warn them? Because that protective state is still there.
Yeah, yeah.
And this happens to people, and they've got to reconcile that with inside themselves. Overall, people are much more caring than we view the world. And social media gives people the opportunity to show their dark side, what you can call the shadow, the evil side of our nature. We can be greedy. We can be jealous. We can be envious. We can be nasty on social media. We can say things to people. Why didn't you do this? Oh, you should have done that. And it's so easy. And then they get this rush inside themselves from speaking out that dark side of themselves. We need to monitor that. But if you are in the public eye, kill your social media. Get somebody else to look at it for you.
Because that's the benefit of it. You can actually turn it off.
Yeah. And also, or get somebody else to look at it for you and tell them what to show you. And don't be afraid of standing up to social media either.
Yeah, because I think very often these people who are saying the negative things, and sometimes it can be really vile, some of the stuff that they say, is really a reflection of their inner being. It really is not about you. It's just about a reflection of who they are.
But there's a footballer called Sadio Mane. He's from Subtly. He played for Liverpool. And it was at a time I had a broken phone. And he was walking out after one of the matches, and he had a broken phone. And one of the reporters said, "Look at him. Why has he got a broken phone? Look, he's worth billions, millions." And he was a super rich guy at that time. And he said, "It's only a broken phone. I don't care." And that opened up. Well, that was interesting. I thought, you're interesting. And he was spending a lot of money back in his home, building schools, stopping people from being poor, feeding the needy, clothing them, building sports arenas. That's where he spent his money.
So he kind of has this bigger purpose, doesn't he? Which comes back to that. Yes, he's a fabulous footballer and he's got all this money, but his purpose is beyond that. There's more to him than just being a footballer, which brings us back into your identity a little bit, I guess, about who you identify as.
Totally. If you can recognize why you're doing this, why things go wrong, is often things go wrong because you need to learn something. Not that you're a bad person. I love the Hindu religion and I love the fact that they are self-reflective, but I'm not into all that punishing stuff. You know, I'm much more Christian, where you are taught something in a benevolent way. If something happens, and it's happened to me, you know, I lost my company, which was devastating because I built it and blah, blah, blah. But I thought, well, why, if this is the case, if this has happened to me, why? What have I got to learn? What have I got to do? Am I being forced to change trajectory in my life? And once you start stepping back from yourself, from the pain of whatever's going on, and say, well, what am I learning here? What do I have to learn? Where can I go? What can I pick up? What can I do instead? Why is this happening to me? Then your whole frame changes. And yes, you have to remove the pain. That has to ebb away. It's diluted gradually. But you learn to do something else. And you might have to retrain, or you might have to do something else. But boy, it's a great way to think that this is happening to you for a reason. And that is for what they call your higher good, that you're meant to be on a different trajectory. You're meant to do something something else in life. And in life, we're not all meant to be doing what we want to do. And this is the trouble with relationships. You can get into a relationship because you want to be in that relationship, but it may be the wrong relationship for you.
And it's not until you're out of that relationship you realize, actually, sometime way down the line, think, oh, thank God I'm out of that relationship.
Yeah. And then you realize, oh, you're too far in it to get out.
Yeah.
You know, and you've sort of made compromises that just don't work, but you've got to stay there. Or you stay there because of the children, or it's not quite right in some way because you didn't prepare yourself. And that means the whole of the community has to be prepared. The families have to talk. You know, is this the right person for you? I know somebody who married a woman. He said, my parents, he's Hindu, and my parents recommended her. She's the right woman for me because they knew me. And he's been happily married for years.
Yeah.
Because it worked for him. You know, and I think it's doing what's right for us, not necessarily what we want, because what we want today, that extra drink, champagne or vodka for me, thank you. But, you know, it might be too much. And you could then, you know, fall over and have an accident and all sorts of things go wrong. Yeah. And it might just not suit you. So, you know, there's all sorts of things that might just not be right for us as individuals.
Yeah. So now I want to get onto a little bit, because we're going to talk about your comedy aspects as well, and how you actually work with people, how you treat people, you know, get people back to performance, back to peak life and enjoying their life again. So let's get into a bit how you work with people, because it's very interesting. You've got the psychotherapy, the deep psychotherapy, but how you actually bring in these elements of comedy as well, which I think is a really unique way, because we all know we feel better when we've had a laugh. It lifts our spirits. But how does that help someone who is going through mental health challenge? So explain a little bit more about that, what your strategies are, or processes.
I can do this one-to-one with people, or I do it in groups. And so far, as I said, I work at Brentford Football Wellness Centre. So there's groups there. So there's a whole diverse range of people and diverse mental health issues. Some people have got social anxiety. Some people have come through a divorce, and some people are near breakdown. And I do 6 sessions. And during that session, basically, I am teaching them the skills of stand-up. Get in front of the microphone. What do you say? But underneath that, I underpin that with mental health techniques of self-awareness, self-deprecation. I know that humor is the best antidepressant that you could have. Men always engage in humor. The joy for humor is, if you're funny with men, it doesn't matter what group you're in, doesn't matter what elite group you're in. If you're a funny person, you can join an elite group of people straight away, because they love your sense of humor. I've seen it over and over again in the city, that if you're funny, they will love your company. And actually, if a woman's funny as well, but she can't be critical and funny. So I teach the regular tricks of stand-up. What do you need to know? You need to know how to hold the microphone, how to walk on stage. What's your opening line? Who am I? How do people see me as an opening line? So, for example, Peter Crouch, when I met him, one of his funniest stories he's ever said, and I'm sure people have heard this, somebody said to him in an interview, Peter, what would you be if you weren't a footballer? And he said, a virgin, which is a brilliant line. And he is a funny man. And I met him and his wife, Abby. And he's absolutely, you know, I mean, isn't he? He's a beanpole. But it's finding out how people see you and self-deprecate. You've got to self-deprecate to keep in with the group. With an audience, you're already elevated because you're on stage. You've got the microphone. You're at an advantage. You've got to self-deprecate, but you've got to do it in a way that people believe you. So they've got to know that you're not just, you know, using somebody else's line. And once you've done that, it's then taking something that's very ordinary in your life and making it extraordinary by focusing on that. So while I show them clips of different comedians that suit them, one-liners, the storyteller, so you might get Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, you might get at the same time with some of our British comedians, you know, Michael McIntyre, Jimmy Carr, Frankie Boyle. There's so many out there now, you know, that we can talk about that are absolutely brilliant. Or you might get Graham Norton when he started, because he didn't have a great deal of content, but he was a brilliant host, brilliant compere. So his content wasn't so good. But he, as a personality, Pat Monahan does it. He engages with everybody. Your personality can be the overwhelming aspect. And so you ad-lib with the audience. It depends who you are. And what I'll do is I'll give them themes to work on that are relevant to them or the group. And they'll come back with incidents in their own lives, which they then turn into something humorous. And by the way the work is done, showing them various clips of how other people do it, what they look at, and also their own lives, they will turn the problem that they've had into something, they magnify it, they exaggerate it, and they tell a story. And then I gradually teach the contextualization of the story. How do you contextualize it in the comedic way? Because it's shorthand. Comedy is shorthand. So you might say something in a one-liner that other people would understand. They'd have to put the rest of the story into. And what sort of style do you choose? Who's your favorite comedian? Will tell you the style that you can choose. And some people love one-liners. When I did my stand-up, I did one-liners because I preferred that. Some people are great storytellers, and they might tell a story if they're a school teacher from school. Oh, one guy did something that he found incredibly healing because his wife had to go through IVF, but it was because he had a low sperm count. Now, this guy was like a rugby player, good looking, just charming, very sociable. But once this had happened to him and his wife had to go through IVF, he found he couldn't go out. He totally stopped him. His whole world was shattered. And what he did in the comedy towards the end of the 6 weeks, he used that as his piece of material. He totally changed the story around. He didn't make it that it wasn't him, but he contextualized it, told the story, and it totally repaired everything for him. He denounced what had happened. He then realized he wasn't ashamed of it. He didn't feel guilty anymore, and he could go and tell everybody. It was now out in the open. And it was done in such a great way for him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it changes your perception of your situation, because when you're in the situation, when you're in the problem, you overthink things, you create stories in your head that aren't necessarily true. They're true, they feel true to you, but they aren't actually the reality. It's how you perceive it. So I would have thought, it seems to me that bringing in that comedy really changes your perspective, and actually to laugh at yourself and laugh at the situation, I would say is very healing.
Yeah, so the whole system is that everybody is, there's confidentiality until the performance time, that you're there to respect each other. So all those ground rules are put in place. But once he started talking about it and hearing other people's stories, you see, because when you're in the close-knit family and your wife, he said, my wife was going through all this stuff, he felt because of me. And he could see the pain she was going through, her own anxiety, because it's quite a rigorous amount of times you have to go to hospital, and the hopes and the dreams, and then the failures, and then the success, and then the pain of the birth, and so on. Oh my gosh, if I had only been, I didn't drink so much, didn't do this so much, didn't run so much, because all of this impacts on our bodies. We don't know which part of our actions affected our bodies, and it might be none of that. If I didn't wear my trousers too tight, or whatever it is that they tell you, it could be impacting on you. But
sometimes things just are. There's no rhyme or reason. It just is.
Exactly. It just is. A cigar sometimes, as Freud said, is just a cigar. And, I think people then feel that they are responsible, and his responsibility, the care, sort of took over. But he, in the end, once he told everybody, and other people were talking to him. And what a funny story, and how brilliant that you've told everybody, because now everybody can own up and go, yes, I've been down that road, or, oh my goodness, I know somebody who's gone through that and it's been terrible. Other people identify with them, but for him, it's such a release. It's that pressure cooker has been released. But yes, because people care. Fundamentally, majority of people care. So it's making sure that if you do care, understanding what is it you feel you've done to upset somebody else, or what is it that you're blaming yourself for? What is it you're fearful of? What is it that's gone on? And once they can, that's why you've got to be in a trusting therapeutic relationship. Because once you've been told that somebody's inner feelings, inner fears, inner worries, inner experience, inner trauma, and some of them have been through terrible, terrible things. As a deep therapist, my job is to keep that confidence, make them feel that they can get through whatever it is they're getting through, and to build on their new lives, that there is a way they can get through this, and that they are not responsible for the actions that have taken place. Because coming back to what you said, in our own minds, especially if you're your own young child, you overblow things and blame yourself. So most children will blame themselves for their parents splitting up, depending on their age. A lot of children will, in that whole of something going wrong, will blame themselves. I did that. And sometimes kids have done something inadvertently. They didn't realize. They might have pushed somebody and, you know, they fell and they broke their leg. And they didn't do it on purpose. But they remember that because for them, their world is so insular. It's me, my family, school. And everything else around that we see isn't there. We've not experienced the outside world as children. So it's magnified, it's amplified, it's massive. And they can feel that pain. Everything in a child is intensified.
Yeah. And then that leads on to what you experience later in life as well. So,
and what happens with later trauma can trigger back to an earlier trauma or parental trauma. So complex PTSD, the army, for example, the ones that really fall into that and really find it difficult to come out of that is because they have had a trauma at a younger age as well, or their parents have gone through a trauma, or their father was in the war, or their mother was in the war, and that is triggered again. And as you say, an unexpected occurrence can happen when you're older, and that can trigger the trauma as well. So it's surprise. Life is a surprise. Your mental health is down to you to keep as on top of it as you can. Keep your mind as healthy as you can. And I'm not saying that just telling everybody, I don't know, I'm not a mad, believer in tell everybody your problems, because sometimes you might not get the response you need. So it's being mindful of who you tell your problems to, but know that you can repair and come through it with the right help. I also do dream work, by the way, and dream work really uncovers stuff for people that it can be quite hidden. And that's really sort of helpful. It's like your own inner film, but yours and yours personally. But I think that there is too much being talked about mental health. So some people who are going through just, oh God, I hate my job, I should be out of here, becomes much bigger, than it should be. So it's actually managing, and that struggle is part of life. We all struggle.
I think that's understanding, it's building that, because I would say it comes back to, I guess, what I was saying earlier about those who genuinely have a serious mental health condition, as opposed to those who are just having a tough time. Maybe they haven't built the capacity, or even if they're just going through a challenging time financially, in a relationship, whatever it is, understanding that, it's not serious, but you may need to just, like you say, talk it through with someone, have a buddy, find a therapist like yourself, and get some help, because you might find within a matter of days, weeks, months, they'll be back to normal. It doesn't mean that you're having a crisis, but the key is to get on top of it as soon as possible, really.
But also when somebody's looking out for you, also see if there's a trigger point that has happened. A loss of a relationship can trigger somebody into a crisis. Financial debt is a very big one for people. If they're in debt, that can trigger something major in people's lives as well. And they are very unlikely to tell their family. So it has to be a friend that they talk to. And there are charities that help with debt, by the way. There are people you can talk to. Don't think that it's the be all and end all, and never allow money to be the be all and end all of your life. So those extremes can happen to you. You know, a loss of a hope. You know, I was going to be a great singer on X Factor. I did the audition and Simon Cowell told me I was terrible. Well, surprise. You know, there's hundreds of you out there. I can say that because I didn't do the X Factor. But, you know, when you're in the theatre, you're always rejected. You just have to get used to it. So, you know, rejection is part of the game. And if you're not prepared for it, the rejection, then that becomes something terrible. If your parents overemphasize how brilliant you are, and then you're rejected somewhere publicly, that shame can actually tip you over the edge. Only if you're super sensitive. And so it's down to parents. Most kids are brought up with parents who know how to help you become more, you know, sort of capable of dealing with failure. It's not whether you should fail. It's you've got to fail. You've got to allow your kids to not win every game. You've got to allow them to be in a race and not win the race.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice for anyone. We're all going to fail at some point. No matter how successful you are, at some point you're going to fail. It's part of life. And you just have to get the right help and support. So with that in mind, what are your quick fire 5 top tips for building mental strength, mental resilience, and peak performance?
So if you're going to do peak performance, you've got to keep doing it. You can't sort of just not. So if I'm doing stand-up, I knew that I was offered to do it, actually. I was offered to be have an agent. And I thought, if I want to be a stand-up, I've got to do it. I've got to go out on the road and do it. Face the audience and just suck it up and do it. Feel the fear, do it anyway. So you've got to get the skills. Find out where your weaknesses are and improve your weaknesses, but also hold on to your strengths and improve your strengths. So you've got to run those two opposites together. And that is absolutely crucial. Do not be afraid of your weaknesses. Do not be afraid that you're lacking the skills. You can always get the skills. And just do it. Do not listen to other people. Do not do the mind, the life balance thing. If you're running work-life balance, who thought of that? Don't have a work-life balance. It's like if you're or what they called, something I've always quite fancied doing but never would, on the sea, you know, sort of when you're surfing. Okay. So you've got to take the wave of time. If your business is starting, you might need to put more time in. Then do that. Be your own person that recognizes what you need to do. So ride the wave. If you need time, then sleep less. Don't go out so much. Don't go on holiday this quarter or whatever. Focus on what you're meant to be doing. Look at your aim. Have a purpose. If you don't know what your purpose is, see what's happened in your past, in your family's life. See what you're good at. See what keeps coming up for you. Everybody has patterns. And you might see something that's happened in your family's life that you think, or like, you know, the Sadio, who just has decided, I want to take this back. I was poor. I want to make my community better. I'm going to do it for them. I don't need another phone. Find it. You don't have to talk about it. This is yours. This is your holy grail. What am I living life for? Only tell people that you know, honor your sacred belief in life. And that's your belief that will get you through everything. That you can, and whatever struggles you're going through, you can get through it. You will find somebody that can help you. or somebody, if you tell somebody, they will find somebody for you, because you can recognize that every one of us at some point goes through something that is incredibly painful and incredibly difficult to overcome, but you can get through it. And I've had this mantra for myself: I'm going to get through this. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I am going to get to where I need to go. So you don't have to know your plan, but you know you can get there, because you'll have a feeling that you're on the right track. And our feelings are really big inside us, our intuition. So, you know, and just know that life can be tricky, and to have a good life, you are engaging with all the tricky aspects of life, all the struggles, all the things that surprise you and that are going to come up and try to trip you up. But you can get through this, and you can. It's like a playground, or as Bill Hicks said, it's just a ride. So get on with it.
I like that to finish up there. It's just a ride.
Yeah.
Just get on the ride and enjoy it. The highs and the lows.
Exactly.
Look, Maria, this has been fantastic talking to you. I mean, so much knowledge, so much information. It's been fantastic and opened our eyes up to many different ways. And I love the idea of splashing some comedy in there. I think that makes a huge difference for people, whether they're going through relationship issues, work issues, money issues, whatever it may be, addiction, whatever it may be. Let's start this movement. Let's get people talking more, getting them help, getting them their buddies, as you suggested earlier, but getting proactive. And as soon as you start noticing those symptoms, start getting help from someone like yourself, if necessary. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's always a joy to talk to you, Julia. Thanks.
And if anyone does want to get in touch with you and find out a little bit more about you, where can they find you?
On my website, www.mariakempinska.com. And that's a good place to go. Or through Julia, of course.
Of course. I'll happily put you in touch. It's not a problem. And if you fancy trying some comedic workshops, I would suggest you give it a go. Personally, I couldn't think of anything worse.
I know, that's why it's good to do. I could tell you how petrified I was. And when I did it, I cannot tell you how amazing it was.
Well, I've been to some of your events, your shows, and I tell you, some of the guys out there, they are fantastic. You know, I take my hat off. You know, I bow to their abilities. It's incredible. It really is incredible. And the transformation's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. It's great to do. And I love seeing them do and make everybody laugh. There's nothing better.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, Marie. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure. And yeah, I'm sure everybody else has enjoyed this episode with you. And thank you and thank everybody for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on Unleash Your Inner Athlete. Thank you.